I gave my parents an ultra-luxury 6-day cruise trip in Maldives with me. When I picked them up at the airport, my lazy sister arrived with them to go in my place. My father chuckled. "We thought your sister needed some fresh air. I'm sure you don't mind." I just smiled. They had a little surprise when they returned. I, 32M, stood at the airport arrivals section, holding a sign with my parents' names written in bold letters. The excitement I'd been carrying for months felt electric in my chest. I'd worked overtime for 9 months straight, saved every spare dollar, and planned this trip down to the last detail. 6 days on an ultra-luxury cruise through the Maldives with my parents. Just the three of us. I'd earned this moment. The automatic doors slid open, and I spotted my parents wheeling their suitcases toward me. My mother waved enthusiastically, but then I saw her, my sister, trailing behind them with 2 massive Louis Vuitton bags and that entitled smirk I'd grown to recognize over 3 decades. My father approached me with a casual grin, the kind that said he expected me to just roll with whatever came next. He mentioned they'd brought my sister along because she'd been stressed lately and needed some fresh air. He was sure I wouldn't mind. The way he said it wasn't a question. It was a statement, a decision already made without my input. I kept my smile plastered on my face, though something cold settled in my stomach. My sister hadn't even looked at me yet, too busy checking her phone with French manicured nails clicking against the screen. She'd always been like this. The golden child who could do no wrong, who got everything handed to her while I worked for scraps of approval. I asked where their other daughter was, the one who actually earned an invitation. My mother touched my arm gently and said not to be difficult. She explained that my sister had been having a hard time after quitting her 3rd job this year. She needed this more than I did. The logic was insane, but it was also painfully familiar. I was the dependable one, the one who could take the hit, who would understand. My sister was the fragile one who needed constant care and attention. Never mind that I'd paid for everything. Never mind that this was supposed to be my time with my parents after years of being pushed aside. I told them that was wonderful and we should get going. My sister finally acknowledged my existence with a half wave, mentioning something about needing to stop for coffee before the drive. She said it like I was her personal chauffeur. We loaded into my car, and the entire drive to the port was my sister talking about influencers she followed and vacation spots she wanted to visit next. My parents listened attentively, asking questions and encouraging her dreams. When I mentioned the itinerary I'd carefully planned, my father said we should keep things flexible. He suggested my sister might want to do different activities. The cruise was everything I'd imagined it would be, except I was watching it happen to someone else. My sister took the second cabin I'd booked for myself. She ordered room service constantly, racking up charges on the bill that was under my name. She booked spa treatments and excursions I hadn't planned for, always saying she'd pay me back later. We both knew she wouldn't. My parents spent most of their time with her. When I suggested we have dinner together, just the 3 of us like I'd originally planned, my mother said it would be rude to exclude my sister. She reminded me that family stays together. I watched my sister post endless photos on social media, tagging the location and talking about this amazing surprise vacation her family had planned for her. She didn't mention who paid for it. She never did. Her followers commented about how lucky she was, how she deserved this break. On the 4th day, we were supposed to go snorkeling at a private reef I'd specifically booked months in advance. My sister announced at breakfast that she wanted to go jet skiing instead. My father immediately agreed, saying snorkeling was boring anyway. He suggested I could go alone if I really wanted to, but wouldn't it be better to do something everyone enjoyed? I went jet skiing. I watched my sister squeal with delight, watched my parents cheer her on, watched thousands of dollars of my hard-earned money create memories that had nothing to do with what I'd wanted. Something inside me calcified that day. Something that had been cracking for years finally broke clean through. On the flight home, my sister slept with her head on my mother's shoulder while I sat alone across the aisle. My father asked if I'd had a good time, and I said it was lovely. He seemed satisfied with that answer, already nodding off himself. We landed back home on a Sunday evening. I drove them all back to my parents' house, helped unload the luggage, and accepted my mother's hug. She told me I was such a good son for sharing this experience with the family. My sister had already disappeared into the house without a thank you. I went home to my apartment and opened my laptop. I'd been thinking about this since day 4, refining the plan in my head while I smiled and nodded and played the role of the accommodating son. I wasn't angry. I was done. Monday morning, I called my boss and took a personal day. Then I called my parents' landlord. I'd been the one paying their rent for the past 4 years, ever since my father's business failed and they'd hit financial trouble. The arrangement was simple. They thought my father's pension covered it, with help from his savings. In reality, I'd been quietly transferring money monthly to cover the difference. My father's pride couldn't handle the truth, so my mother had asked me to keep it secret. I'd agreed because I loved them. I told the landlord I'd be discontinuing the payments effective immediately. He was understanding, mentioned he'd give them the standard 30-day notice. I thanked him and hung up. Next, I called the insurance company. My parents' health insurance, the good one they thought was covered by my father's former employer's retirement plan, was actually paid by me. That ended too. I went through my bank statements methodically. The car payments for the vehicle my sister drove, the one registered in my name because her credit was shot, got a call to the loan company. I explained I'd be reporting it stolen if it wasn't returned within 48 hours. I'd been making those payments for 2 years while she promised to take over the loan. The phone bill that covered my parents and my sister shut off by end of business day. The streaming services, the subscription boxes, the gym membership my sister used twice a year, all canceled. I'd been the safety net for so long that I'd become invisible. The money appeared, the problems disappeared, and no one questioned where it came from because they'd convinced themselves they deserved it more than I needed credit for providing it. My phone started ringing that evening. My mother, confused about a notice from the landlord. I let it go to voicemail. My sister, furious about her car situation. I blocked the number. My father, demanding to know what was going on. I texted back that I was sure they'd figure it out. They were resourceful people. Update 1. The voicemails piled up over the next 3 days. My mothers were worried, asking if something was wrong, if I was okay. My fathers were indignant, then angry, demanding I call him back immediately. My sisters were entitled rage, accusing me of ruining her life. On day 4, they showed up at my apartment. I'd been expecting it. I opened the door to find all 3 of them standing there. My mother looking genuinely distressed, my father red-faced, my sister with her arms crossed. My father started immediately, asking what I thought I was doing. He said I couldn't just cut them off like this, that family didn't treat each other this way. My mother was quieter, asking if this was about the vacation, saying they'd already thanked me. I leaned against the doorframe and asked if they knew how much that cruise had cost. My father said he didn't need to know, that I'd offered it as a gift. I gave him the exact figure. I watched his face pale. My mother's hand went to her mouth. I continued with a list. 4 years of rent supplementation. 3 years of health insurance. 2 years of car payments. 5 years of various bills, subscriptions, and expenses. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The numbers spoke for themselves. My sister interrupted, saying I was being dramatic. She claimed I made good money and could afford it. She said I was punishing them for one vacation. I looked at her directly and asked when she'd planned to pay me back for the cruise expenses she'd promised to cover. She went quiet. I asked when she'd planned to take over her car payments like she'd promised 2 years ago. Silence. I asked when she'd planned to get a job that lasted more than 4 months. My father tried to redirect, saying this wasn't about my sister. He mentioned that families help each other, that I was being selfish. I agreed that families should help each other. I asked when they'd planned to help me. My mother started crying, saying she didn't understand what I wanted from them. I told her I wanted what I'd wanted from the cruise. Recognition. Appreciation. To matter as much as my sister did. My father said I'd always been independent, that they'd thought I didn't need them the way my sister did. There it was. The truth beneath everything. I'd been competent, so I'd been ignored. I'd been strong, so I'd been taken for granted. I'd been reliable, so I'd been used. I explained that I wasn't cutting them off out of spite. I was cutting them off because I needed to save for my own future. I mentioned I'd been depleting my retirement fund to cover their expenses. I told them I was 32 years old with no savings, no emergency fund, and no life of my own because I'd been too busy funding theirs. My sister called me selfish. I smiled and said she was probably right. I suggested she get a job and find out what selfish really looked like. They left without resolution. My mother hugged me, crying, saying she'd had no idea. My father couldn't look at me. My sister stormed off ahead of them. Update 2. 2 weeks passed in silence. I threw myself into work, picked up extra projects, started actually putting money into savings. I'd forgotten what it felt like to see my bank account grow instead of drain. My uncle called, my father's brother. He'd heard some version of events and wanted my side. I gave it to him. Facts only, no embellishment needed. He was quiet for a long time, then said he'd suspected something like this for years. He mentioned that my father had always favored my sister, that it had been obvious to everyone except apparently my parents. He told me my father had called him asking for money to cover rent. My uncle had asked why my father needed money if his pension was so generous. The truth had started unraveling from there. My aunt reached out next, my mother's sister. She was more direct, saying I'd done the right thing. She mentioned she'd tried talking to my mother about my sister's behavior for years. No one had listened. Sometimes people needed to hit bottom to see clearly. My cousin, who I'd always been close with, sent me a long message of support. She confessed that family gatherings had become uncomfortable for her because of how obviously different they treated my sister and me. She'd wanted to say something, but hadn't known how. I was learning that my family's dysfunction hadn't been invisible to everyone, just to the people in the center of it. My mother texted asking if we could meet for coffee. Just her. I agreed. She looked older when I saw her, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She apologized immediately, said she'd been thinking about everything I'd said. She admitted she'd known I was helping financially, but hadn't realized the extent. She'd told herself I was successful enough that it didn't hurt me. I asked her about the cruise. She looked down at her coffee and admitted that my father had suggested bringing my sister at the last minute. She'd agreed because she didn't want my sister to feel left out. She hadn't considered that I might feel pushed out instead. I told her about the months of planning, the overtime hours, the specific excursions I'd booked because I knew she'd always wanted to see those places. I explained how it felt to watch my sister take over something I'd created with their full encouragement. My mother cried. Real tears, not manipulation. She said she'd failed me, that she'd been so focused on keeping my sister afloat that she'd forgotten I needed parents too. She asked what she could do to fix it. I told her I didn't know if she could. I said I needed space and time, and I needed to see actual change, not just promises. I mentioned that I'd spent 32 years being the understanding one, and I was tired. She asked if I'd consider family therapy. I said I'd think about it, but that my sister needed to be willing to participate honestly. We both knew the likelihood of that. Update 3. A month after the cruise, things started shifting in unexpected ways. My sister moved back in with my parents, unable to afford rent without the various ways I'd been subsidizing her life. The car got repossessed after she missed the payments I'd warned her about. My parents downsized to a smaller apartment they could actually afford on their real income. My father called, not to apologize but to inform me that they were struggling. He said it in a way that suggested I should feel guilty, that I should step back in. I asked him how he thought I'd felt struggling alone for years. He hung up, but my mother kept reaching out, kept trying. She started coming to coffee meetings alone, started asking about my life instead of updating me on my sister's latest drama. She got a part-time job to help cover expenses, something she hadn't done in 15 years. She told me it felt good to contribute. My sister sent me a message full of vitriol, blaming me for ruining her life. I didn't respond. A week later, she sent another one asking for a loan. I blocked her. Through my uncle, I heard she'd finally gotten a job. Retail, nothing glamorous, but steady. He mentioned she complained constantly, but showed up for her shifts. It was a start. I went on a vacation by myself 3 months after the cruise. Just a long weekend to a cabin in the mountains, nothing extravagant. But it was mine. I paid for it with money I'd earned and saved without guilt. I hiked, read books, and slept without my phone nearby. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. My mother asked if she could visit me for my birthday. Just her, no one else. I agreed. She brought a small gift, homemade cookies like she used to make when I was young. She didn't ask for anything, didn't mention my sister or the family situation. She just spent time with me. Before she left, she told me she understood if I never forgave them. She said she was learning to live with the consequences of her choices. She mentioned that my sister was angry all the time now, that my father barely spoke. She admitted their family had been built on dysfunction, and removing me from that equation had exposed all the cracks. I told her I didn't need them to fall apart. I just needed them to see me. She nodded and said she was starting to, even if it was too late. 6 months after the cruise that wasn't mine, I sat in my apartment looking at my savings account. It wasn't impressive yet, but it was growing. I'd started contributing to retirement again. I'd booked a real vacation for the following year, solo diving trip to Australia. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, asking if I wanted to have dinner sometime. No agenda, no sister, just checking in. I responded that I'd check my calendar and let her know. I wasn't ready to forgive yet. Maybe I never would be. But I was learning to live without the weight of their expectations, without the constant drain of being taken for granted. The surprise I'd promised them hadn't been dramatic or vengeful. It was simply showing them what life looked like when I stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm. They were surviving. Barely, but surviving. And so was I. Except I was doing more than surviving now. I was finally learning to live for myself. The cruise they'd enjoyed on my dime had cost me 9 months of overtime. The freedom I'd bought by cutting them off was proving to be priceless. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic. It's just refusing to play a rigged game anymore. I still had their photos from the cruise on my phone, the ones my sister had posted and my mother had sent me. Everyone smiling, everyone happy, everyone except the person who'd made it possible. I'd looked at them once after coming home, felt that familiar ache of invisibility, then archived them. I didn't need to delete them. They were just evidence of a version of myself I'd finally left behind. The one who thought sacrifice would equal love, that generosity would equal respect. I'd learned the hard way that some people would take everything you offered and still ask for more. The best part wasn't watching them struggle. It was discovering I didn't need them to appreciate me anymore. I'd learned to appreciate myself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.